Good morning. It's 4 o'clock here in the UK. One of those nights again. I think I fell asleep on the sofa quite early. Called my partner, who went to bed about an hour ago. Marathon gaming session on her laptop, apparently. I wanted to talk about my hometown, Ipswich, Suffolk's homelessness problem. Something because I have a lot of time on my hands and I walk the streets during the day an awful lot. I see an awful lot of. This was brought to a forefront in my mind by an incident yesterday. Lighter. I still spend quite a lot of time when Michelle kind of needs me to get out of her hair for a while, down at Ipswich Community Hub where I used to volunteer. Perfectly acceptable for me to do so with the majority of people that are there. Even the boss is back on friendly terms with me, and this is a good thing, considering the falling out I had with them for a while. But I turn up there is I think, Hispanic gentleman literally sitting on the doorstep of one of the entrances, ranting and shouting to himself. I've seen him about before. I've seen him wandering around my little area of town, pausing to shout at the pavement, talking to himself, obviously very unwell. But I don't know him. Trying to talk to him could provoke him into some kind of reaction that's potentially dangerous for himself or other people, because I don't know him. I don't know his story. And one of the regular founding members was there, and there was no men in there. And the 6 or so women did look visibly afraid and uncomfortable with this man squatting on their doorstep. Basically, they had locked the door, but Elaine unlocked it to let me in, and she was like, oh, thank God. I was like, what's occurring? And she was like, he's been sitting there for half an hour ranting and no one wants to come in. Understandably, and it's a business. She sells retro clothing and chic jewelry and stuff like that, pre-loved. And for all the other traders, this man was stopping people from going in. And I relocked the door and I sat there, and eventually he wandered off over the road. So I unlocked the door, but kept an eye on him. Sometimes very discreetly by using the window to keep an observation on him, the reflection in the window. And I noticed a young lady who was on her phone. Elaine had already phoned the police to basically say he's blocking entrance to our business. He is intimidating people who are in here, and some of them are vulnerable. So yeah, basically, this young lady, he started wandering up the street towards the town centre. So this young lady took it upon herself to, still on the phone to the police, walk after him. And I already said, well, for my security services, I'd like a cup of tea. And so someone was making me a cup of tea. I said, I'll be back in a minute, because I was determined that this young lady should not, you know, put herself in danger. So I followed her about 10 yards behind her to make sure this man didn't turn round, you know, and start something. He was at this point noticing he was being followed, which made me feel even more tense and ready for anything. Yeah. As it was, the police caught up with him at the top of the road, and so I went back to Chip and we all sat there, feeling much relieved. But it made me feel good. The relief on Elaine and a few other people's faces, because suddenly they felt safe because I'd arrived, and that is an unusual and pleasant feeling for me. Normally, because I've got my own mental health issues, in certain places I make people feel unsafe when I walk in, because they've seen me lose my temper at some point, or they've heard something about me that makes me feel uncomfortable, or the way I look and the way I act makes them feel uncomfortable. I do get that. But anyway, that's a tangent. This town for years now has had a real problem with homelessness. There are the regulars. This man I've seen wandering about. In fact, he was wandering about town later, and I spoke to what do they call them? Well, unpaid voluntary community police officer. I think they call them now. You know, people who volunteer to be part-time coppers, they get paid for it. You know, I know. Do they? Answers on a postcard, please. Bonus points if you know what a postcard actually is. That means you're old, like me. And I spoke to this police officer about him, and she said, yes, he's very well known. He's never harmed anyone. We think he's more of a harm to himself, but we keep an eye on him. So yeah, he's harmless. Apparently, nobody's harmless. There is a woman that's always outside the local Tesco's Express, who, as far as I know, may be younger than me, but looks in her 70s. I think there's been heavy drug use over the years. Very pleasantly, one of my local pubs used to let us sit in there. You know. And she's always hanging around the bus stop outside it. And I always thought that was nice of them, although they have had issues with some of the homeless element, wrecking the toilets, doing drugs in the toilets. So I think they clamped down on that because of that. And I don't blame them, they've got business to run. Yeah, this particular one, I think she goes through mental health episodes. But most of the time you will see her eating food that people have bought for her, and she seems content with the fact that people won't give her money, but give her food. There is another younger girl who I've seen around for years who is totally addicted to lighter gas. And she will ask you for money, and if she's high as a kite, she will get aggressive about it. Not that she could do anything. Verbally aggressive. I once saw her couple of months ago outside my local corner shop, basically collapsed under a sleeping bag, demanding money in her, "Please sir, can I have some more?" voice, and I just said no, and she started shouting and screaming and ranting and spitting. So with a neighbour of mine who I know who runs a delicatessen in town, I walked on by. I've seen her go up and down over the years. I don't think it'll be long till someone finds her dead, and that's the grim reality of it. But there are many, many more that I see every day. There's the man of African descent who is often sleeping in a shop doorway, who talks to himself a lot, who yet again obviously has mental health issues that are untreated. There's a group that often congregate outside what used to be Debenhams in the town centre. It distresses me that these people are left to fend for themselves. Many of them are extremely vulnerable. I pass the time of day with some of them because, but then again, you see, sometimes you try and help them. I mean, there was an example a couple of months ago now. There's one old boy who always has a dog with him. Many of them do. And someone had dropped halal salami. Bloody great one, which we made lots of jokes about. Hi, Paula. Someone had dropped it outside of a food bank, and I picked it up, and I thought, turkey salami? No, not to my taste. Don't care that it's halal or not. That's a separate issue. Because at the end of the day, that animal has still been slaughtered. And to be honest, how it's slaughtered, well, is a moot point, isn't it? I just don't like turkey very much. And after it had been used for various practical jokes, I thought, well, I'm not going to eat it. What do I do with it? And this old boy was outside another major chain store that closed in the past few years in Ipswich, because Debenhams obviously shut down because Debenhams failed as a chain. This was another one that has been derelict for over a year now, where they often hang out. And, well, I gave it to him ostensibly so he could either feed himself or the dog. He ripped it open for the dog. Dog didn't want to know. That tells you something. But then instead of maybe eating himself, he started chucking it about the street for the seagulls. And obviously that drew the attention of the local special constables. That's what we used to call them. I know they call it something different now. So my act of charity somewhat backfired because of this man's mental health, I think. But it happens. You cannot predict how someone with mental health problems is going to react in a given situation unless you know them and know their mental health problems. There's also excuse me. There's also the old gentleman who a lot of people say lives under Stoke Bridge. Grey beard, long grey hair. He often pops into Chip. I don't know if he still does. I'm not there often enough now. I'm not a volunteer. And they'll make him a cup of tea and he'll go for a stroll back to his home base And then half an hour, he'll bring you the mug back, 9 times out of 10. You know, occasionally he doesn't, he forgets it. He's a lovely old boy. I wonder with him whether the homelessness was a choice rather than something he was forced, because he doesn't seem like his mental health problems are that difficult. Maybe he just decided he wants nothing to do with the system. The system we have basically means that if you want nothing to do with the system, that they leave you with nothing. If you don't want to participate, you get nothing from them. Which makes me angry. For all I know, maybe he paid his taxes and worked hard for years. For all I know, he may have been ex-army. I don't know. It saddens me. And the contrast of seeing someone sleeping in an abandoned shop doorway while over the road, overly manicured, overly lipsticked office workers drink their expensive coffee and have a croissant, while some guy's in a sleeping bag across the road. That makes me angry. Your over-expensive coffee and your croissant that you view as a little treat because, I mean, yeah, you've had such a shit day and you've got so much work to do. I could buy that man a lifeline. Go buy him a warm jumper or something from Primark. I'm sure it wouldn't cost much more than your coffee. Buy him a coffee. Probably needs it. And these people are left by our system. Charities these days find it harder and harder to pick up that slack because they're hard pressed for cash themselves. But the idea that so many people are just left to fend for themselves. Oh, it's the natural order of things. It's the natural order of economic competition, say some people. Usually people who've never been there. Although I have witnessed some who are very low income and, you know, shouldn't really be supporting that kind of idea, who but thoroughly believe in it. And I'm thinking, okay, if you thoroughly believe in that and you're content being bottom of the pile, fair enough, mate. But I think you're deluded. Something needs to change. I mean, the closest I've been myself would be being technically homeless. I'm not counting moving back in with my parents. That happened a couple of times in the times before I met Michelle. During my time that I lived in Colchester in Essex, I was technically homeless in a 13th century house for about 3 months. Yeah, I split up with a young lady who I was in a very long-term relationship with. We actually got pagan hand-fasted. To me, it felt like a marriage, although it wasn't legally binding, but I had many issues that I wasn't dealing with, so did she, so it all fell apart eventually rather spectacularly, and I over-dramatised the situation, which didn't help. But a very good friend of mine who sadly passed away 10 years ago now, I think, leaving behind a wife and 2 kids, I think, which is sad. He basically said, oh, well, you can come and live in our loft. And I knew the place. It was in Stratford St Mary, which is a very exclusive village on the Essex-Suffolk border. Beautiful old building, all wooden beams, and so I was technically homeless in a house that's probably worth more than this entire block here. And they ain't exactly cheap round here either. You know, we rent, of course. But I think the last time the next door neighbour, before they turned it into a house share, you know, because they used to actually live there, and the last time that they put that up on the market, it was £250,000, UK money. And that was several years ago. But the problem with a lot of these old buildings is because they do need renovation, it lessens their value. But at least I suppose they haven't just left it derelict. They're housing people, probably creaming off an awful lot of profit over it as well. But yeah, so I urge you, people, if a homeless person appears to be approachable, don't feel you have to risk yourself. If they appear approachable, help them in any way you can, whether it's just buying them a bottle of drinking water, asking them if they're hungry, or even just passing the time of day. Or if you happen to be a smoker and, you know, they are too, give them a smoke, you know, 20p if you've got it. Because many of them aren't bad or dangerous or mad people. They're just people. And I hope this never happens to any of you out there. But remember, it's a possibility. Lives can change in an instant. 1 minute you're earning, I don't know, 40k a year, happily married. Next, you're homeless because the wife's taken everything and she's moved in with a new lover, and you have a mental breakdown, and then you're on the street and there's no help from government services and you're on your own. That is how it seems to be. So any amount of small help you can give to these people, you know, there's the old argument that if you give them money, they'll spend it on drugs, isn't there? You like going for a few pints down the boozer, that's a drug. Why are you denying these people the chance to have a short moment of pleasure? So don't worry about what they're spending that money on. Okay, there is the idea, especially with the young lady who snorts butane gas, that money could contribute towards her death, but that's her choice, isn't it? I know because she's an addict, perhaps it feels like she doesn't have a choice. There are many arguments. But all I'm saying is I appeal to my fellow human beings. If you've got the time, even if it's just to pass the time of day with some of these people, even that will help them. Even just to nod and smile. Because I feel so sorry for them. Because they shouldn't be on the streets. That's my thoughts for this morning.